War and procedure. It's not the Russian regulars who are bearing the main burden of war in eastern Ukraine. It is the troops of pro-Russian puppet states Donetsk People's Republic and Luhansk People's Republic. Just now 105th and 107th regiments of the DPR refused to fight. Thread. When Russia took control over parts of Donetsk and Luhansk oblasts, it didn't annex or unite them. They created two states, DPR and LPR, which were formally sovereign and separate from each other. This procedural decision backfired now with DPR fighters refusing to go to the LNR. Watch this video with fighters of DPR's 107th regiments. They just spent 3 months fighting for Mariupol. Now they complain that their commanders want to send them fight to the LPR, which is a completely different republic, presenting them as some Cossack volunteers.
Дорогие уважаемые сограждане ДНР, мы военнослужащие 107-й стрелкового полка, 4-й батальон, 3-я, 2-я и 4-я роты, 204 человека. Отказываемся ехать на убой в ЛНР, совсем другую республику. С нами были проведены масса незаконных действий. Нас призвали незаконно в нарушение приказа. С нами не было проведено медицинского обследования во время призыва. Нас неоднократно обманывали и обманом пытались завести на территорию ЛНР, где по неподтвержденным данным мы уже являемся частью какого-то казачества, добровольно вступившие в ряды вооруженных сил ЛНР, и срочно бессеребренниками будем там умирать. А умереть там недолго. 3 месяца мы вели бои за освобождение Мариуполя. Мариуполь освобожден, но пушечным мясом мы быть не хотим. В очередной раз нас обманом пытаются завести от 21-й шахты в городе Ханжонково, где нас ждут представители от кабинета Пушилина, где должны выслушать все наши законные требования, где должны мы написать даже военной прокуратуре объяснительные и отчеты о незаконных действиях и нарушениях нашего командования. Здесь наши жены, матеря. Я надеюсь, ваша поддержка тоже с нами.
Целая колонна следует.
С нами есть пленный человек, который был в плену свыше 2 месяцев.
This shouldn't be viewed as a proof of some Donetsk identity being separate from that of Luhansk. Motivation of these guys is clear. They openly say they don't want to be the cannon fodder and non-mercenaries, who are not even paid for fighting in Mariupol. They don't want to be used as the unpaid cannon fodder. How can they avoid it? Well, by correctly grasping and exploiting the nature of the Russian state, with its DPR and LPR proxies, which are all very procedural. They are not run by a personal whim, but rather by procedures. All arguments are procedural. We are DPR citizens being sent to a completely different republic. They listed us as Cossack volunteers. We are neither. They mobilized us without a medical checkup. They want to trick us from writing a complaint to the military attorney. Now watch a complaint by the fighters of the DPRTH 105th Regiment. It's even better. I hope you know Russian so that you can enjoy its most beautiful, the formal language of bureaucratic papers which nobody speaks on in real life, unless you want to make people laugh.
Уважаемый Денис Владимирович, личный состав 3-го стрелкового батальона 105-го стрелкового полка войсковой части 08-818 обращается к вам со следующим. Военнослужащие 3-го стрелкового батальона 105-го стрелкового полка войсковой части 08-818 были мобилизованы в период 23.02.2022 по настоящее время. Вопреки вашим публичным заявлениям о том, что мобилизованные резервисты не будут непосредственно участвовать в боевых действиях, а будут участвовать в восстановлении и сохранении правопорядка на освобожденных территориях ДНР, а также занимать 3-ю линию обороны, личный состав 3-го стрелкового батальона 105-го стрелкового полка, будучи необученным и неопытным в ведении боевых действий, до момента мобилизации проходили обучение в вузах, работали на различного рода предприятиях и в различных отраслях, не имеющих отношения к воинской службе, а также не прошедшие обязательное медицинское обследование. Многие мобилизованные имеют острые хронические заболевания. Находились с 13.03.2022 на передовых позициях в городе Мариуполе. Обращаю ваше внимание, что в период с 13.03 по настоящее время, неся боевые и другие потери, по состоянию на 23.05.2022 налицо осталось 60% личного состава. Личный состав 3-го стрелкового батальона 105-го стрелкового полка выполнил поставленные боевые задачи, а именно оборона занимаемых позиций в городе Мариуполе, ведение наступательных боевых действий. В настоящий момент личный состав находится на территории другого государства, а именно Луганской Народной Республики, граждане которого мобилизованные не являются. Военнослужащие.
We are not soldiers. We used to be college students and workers of various enterprises who were forcibly mobilized into the DPR army. They told us we'll only maintain law and order or stand in the third line of defense. Bullshit. They sent us to attack Mariupol instead. The medical examination is compulsory during the mobilization. Nobody examined us. Many have chronic illnesses. They want to send us to fight in the LPR. But we are citizens of the DPR, not of the LPR. We already suffered casualties in Mariupol. Only 60% remain in service. News about the DPR army unrests are confirmed by Evgeny Mikhailov in his Live journal. Mikhailov is an ex-governor of Pskov Oblast, ex-deputy chief of the Putin's presidential administration and also the ex-minister for the Council of Ministers of the DPR. Now Mikhailov is constantly showing up together with Strelkov. They're always bashing Putin for waging the war so inefficiently, for a number of reasons which I don't want to list here. I think that Mikhailov is sincere in his criticism of Putin not being a strongman enough. What does the story of the DPR army unrest teach us? Well, first of all that many in the DPR army are unwilling to fight any further. They were forcibly mobilized and now their discontent reached the point when they dared to show an open disobedience. Fighting is too risky. In fact, fighting may be way riskier for the DPR troops than for the Russian regulars. Russian government is way more comfortable with using them as the cannon fodder than with using the Russian citizens. After all, DPR and LPR casualties are not even counted as Russian ones. Since DPR casualties are not counted as Russian, you immobilize in Donetsk everyone you can catch and then send them to attack the massive Ukrainian fortifications. You run out of the Donetsk males, of course, but on the bright side you keep official Russian casualties low. It sucks being an DPR recruit sent to assault the Azovstal with only an ancient Masinka rifle, and yet, those recruits absolutely can try to avoid being used as the cannon fodder if they understand the nature of the Russian regime, which is procedural, like very procedural. Out of 3 branches of the pro-Russian forces fighting in Ukraine, Russian army is the most procedural. Chechen troops are the least procedural, with the Donetsk and Luhansk armies having drifted from the non-procedural wallotships to the procedural bureaucracies over the years. How can you protest decisions of a bureaucracy, pointing out to the procedural requirements not being met? Of course, we are from the DPR and yet they are sending us to the LPR, which is a completely different state that we are not citizens of. Procedural requirements not met. Procedure of mobilization requires a compulsory medical examination. Nobody examined us. Many have chronic illnesses. By the way, every young Russian male with an IQ above the room temperature collects as many certificates about chronic illnesses as possible. For this very reason, we are trying to contact a military attorney to file a formal complaint. They are tricking us away from him. Again, these guys are trying to fight with the procedural decisions by procedural means. The decisions of their commanders are illegal and yet procedural. You can protest. As we can see, the mental model of the Russian state machine, including its DPR and LPR proxies, these people have on mind is very different from the mental model of many Westerners who view Russian policies as completely arbitrary and whimsical, which they are not. DPR conscripts view Russian plus DPR plus LPR, state as a huge machine, working according to an algorithm which absolutely can be hacked. Just don't protest openly and find some procedural pretexts in order not to follow its orders. Try being creative. That works. I'd even say that Germans or French would understand the Russian state machine much better than Anglos. Russian legal system is based upon the civil law rather than the common law model. It's much more about the letter rather than the spirit of the law. I'll give examples later. NB. Don't view the Russian state as a human. Don't judge its actions or policies by a human logic. That's wrong. It's a super bureaucratic machine operating in a super bureaucratic algorithm and according to a machine rather than to a human logic. Notice that I'm talking about the peculiarities of the Russian institutional culture rather than about the peculiarities of the Russian state per se. Not only the Russian state but many of its rivals in the region ultimately share or shared the same institutional culture. Der Luguian, who studied the documents of Chechen rebels of the 1990s, was impressed by their administrative style. They tried to document everything very meticulously, copying the Soviet style, conceptual framework and Soviet logic. They didn't know any other way of doing things. That, by the way, is a major difference between Chechnya and Afghanistan. For the entire 20th, Chechens had been learning how to live in a super bureaucratic Russian culture and adapted to it quite well. Afghans didn't have a comparable experience. Also, Chechnya is not nearly as tribal. Let's assume for the sake of argument that those DPR conscripts know the institutional culture they are living in well and try to exploit it. In this case, the procedurality, the machine-like logic and the algorithmic style policies would be particular features of that machine. I would argue that the quality of the Western, specifically American expertise on Russia is very uneven. When it comes to the hardware, everything objective, material and quantifiable, its average quality varies from okays to absolutely great. When it comes to something as elusive and often unverifiable as culture, the quality of the expertise deteriorates quickly. Western expertocracies may understand well what their adversaries, but they may have little idea why. They are not interested at all. What has always puzzled me about the American expertocracy is its incredible contempt to the public discourse and the public imagination of other cultures. That's why the American academia has little idea about the modern Russian nationalism, which is a big factor of the Z war. Don't get me wrong. I don't claim that the American pundits or journalists have no idea about the modern Russian nationalism. I claim that the American academia and the entire Russian studies industry doesn't, because they never paid attention to it in the first place. Let me illustrate my thesis with the following blog post of Mikhailov, who worked as a governor of Pskov, a deputy of Putin's presidential administration and then a DPR minister. The most horrifying Russian weapon is Dmitry Gorkovsky. Have you heard about Gorkovsky? I bet you didn't. Academia is not very much interested either. I quickly typed the name into the Google Scholar and got just 91 results, most of which focus on him as a postmodernist writer. Paradoxically enough, the person who created the language and the discourse of the modern Russian nationalism gets almost no coverage in the West. Because the Western equals American academia has fundamentally wrong system of incentives when it comes to the Russian studies. End of thread.